Has llegado a misterios de la oscuridad. En este espacio prohibido, la noche oculta verdades demasiado aterradoras para ser reveladas a la luz del día. Aquí, los misterios que emergen del abismo oscuro desvelan secretos que harán temblar tu cordura. Las historias que estás por descubrir desafiarán todo lo que creías conocer, envolviéndote en un torbellino de miedos y enigmas. Ten cuidado al avanzar, pues algunas puertas, una vez abiertas, nunca podrán cerrarse, y sus revelaciones podrían costarte más de lo que imaginas. The first intrusion upon normalcy wasn't a sound, but a sight. Spectral dampness tracing impossible paths across the polished grain of my floorboards. Aqueous footprints, leading from nothingness, terminating abruptly. They hadn't marred the gleaming wood when Elias Thorne departed for the day's obligations mere hours ago. He remained poised in the threshold, attaché case a dead weight in his hand, gaze locked on the unsettling trail. 15 stories the city sprawled beneath him, 15 floors separating his sanctuary from the earth. Every window stood sealed against the urban air. The door, moments before, had yielded only to his key in its secured deadbolt. Time stretched, elastic and silent, holding Elias captive in the doorway. His knuckles whitened on the cool brass of the knob behind him, a primal urge to flee, warring with the stubborn fact of arrival. Flee where? This space, these walls, constituted home. The imprints themselves were delicate, perhaps belonging to a woman, size 7, maybe 8. They materialized inexplicably mid-living room, charted a course toward the galley kitchen, then looped back, veering into the shadowed corridor leading to his bedroom before simply ceasing. A profound quietness pressed inwards, a tangible weight against his eardrums, broken only by the ragged rhythm of his own breathing, a betraying cadence that had quickened unnoticed. The starched collar of his shirt felt suddenly constricting. With his free hand, the one not welded to the doorknob, he fumbled at his tie, loosening the knot. Inspection was necessary, imperative even, yet his feet remained leaden anchors. The climate control system surged to life, its mechanical exhalations startlingly loud. Elias flinched violently. His keys, dislodged from nerveless fingers, struck the hardwood with a sharp, metallic clang that reverberated through the unnervingly still apartment. Is someone present? The question emerged a dry rasp. Clearing his throat, he projected again, louder, striving for authority he didn't feel. Hello? I know you're here. Only the monotonous hum of the ventilation answered. Finally, reluctantly, he relinquished his grip on the escape route. Bending, he retrieved the fallen keys, their cold metal shocking against his clammy palm. The attaché case, suddenly cumbersome, was deposited near the entrance. He required both hands. These weren't mere smudges of moisture. They were detailed impressions, sharp-edged, as if their maker had stepped directly from some unseen pool onto his floor. In the clearer marks, the distinct shapes of individual toes were visible, still glistening, the perimeters not yet surrendering to evaporation. His mobile felt heavy in his pocket. He drew it out, thumb hovering over the emergency call icon, but hesitated. An operator answers. What then? Greetings. My locked 15th floor apartment contains unexplained wet footprints. Derision, or perhaps assumptions of intoxication, seemed the likely response. A thorough search was the only rational precursor. His apartment wasn't expansive. A living area flowing into the kitchen, a compact dining alcove, a single hallway accessing the bedroom and adjacent bath. The damp trail led kitchen ward first. Elias followed, his steps carefully avoiding the prints, each footfall coaxing a faint groan from the floorboards beneath. Preserve the evidence. Evidence of precisely what remained terrifyingly ambiguous. The kitchen, bathed in the afternoon light filtering through the window above the sink, appeared initially undisturbed. Nothing amiss on the counters. Breakfast crockery rested innocently in the drying rack. Then his eye caught it. The cabinet door beneath the sink, slightly ajar. He maintained a strict habit of ensuring it was latched, the hinge being faulty, prone to swinging open otherwise. Approaching with measured steps, he pulled it wide. Pipes gleamed dully, connections secure, the disposal unit utterly dry. No leak offered a mundane explanation, yet something was profoundly wrong. His cleaning supplies had been rearranged. The potent bleach, usually relegated to the back due to infrequent use, now stood front and center. Its label turned perfectly outward. A deliberate, almost curated placement. A prickling sensation crawled up the nape of his neck. Someone had knelt here, beneath his sink. Someone had invaded his private space while he was absent, handling his possessions, reordering them. To what end? What quarry had they sought? From the butcher block nearby, he selected a heavy chef's knife. A meager defense, perhaps, but its solid weight offered a sliver of reassurance as he turned to track the footprints back towards the bedroom corridor. They proceeded down the narrow passage, halting directly before his closed bedroom door. A fainter set of prints overlaid the first, heading back towards the living room, suggesting entry, then egress by the same route. These returning marks showed signs of drying, their edges blurred. He stood motionless outside the door, knife held defensively, listening intently. Silence reigned within. His hand reached for the doorknob. It felt cool beneath his touch. Drawing a deep, steadying breath, he turned it with painstaking slowness and nudged the door inward. Darkness greeted him. He groped along the wall for the light switch, gaze fixed on the unrevealing gloom ahead. The overhead fixture flickered, then steadied, illuminating a scene superficially normal. The bed remained neatly made from the morning's routine. Closet doors shut, windows secured. Yet an indefinable sense of wrongness permeated the air. His scrutiny intensified. There. The drawers of his tallboy dresser weren't quite flush. He possessed a distinct memory of shutting them completely after dressing. The lowest drawer, prone to rolling open, demanded it. Moving closer confirmed his observation. All drawers bore signs of hasty opening and closing. Clothing lay rumpled within, his meticulous folds disrupted. Someone had rifled through his garments, searching. The closet beckoned next. He advanced cautiously, blade poised. The bifold doors were closed, but crucially, not latched. Another deviation from his established habit. Unlatched, they tended to drift apart. A slight tremor afflicted his hand as he reached for the handle. With a sudden jerk, he pulled the doors wide, simultaneously stepping back, knife raised. Emptiness. Only his suits and shirts hanging in orderly rows. But no, even here, violation. The spacing between the hangers was erratic. Elias adhered to a precise 1-inch gap between each garment, a small bulwark against clutter. Now some hangers were jammed together, while others were separated by wide voids. His closet, too, had been subject to an intrusive search. Only the bathroom remained. Its door stood open, revealing an unlit interior. The wet footprints led directly to its threshold. Flipping the light switch, Elias performed a rapid visual sweep. Initially, nothing seemed out of place, until his gaze fell upon the shower curtain. It was drawn fully closed. He never left it closed. Open, it allowed the enclosure to air, preventing mildew. His heart hammered against his ribs as he approached the tub, the knife handle slick in his sweating grasp. Reaching out, he seized the edge of the vinyl curtain, inhaled sharply, and ripped it back along its track. Nothing, just the familiar bone-dry tiles of his shower stall. No lingering dampness, no hint of water. The origin of the footprints remained an infuriating enigma. He returned to the living room, retracing the path of the aqueous marks once more. Their genesis remained the greatest puzzle. Mid-room, as if conjured from the air itself. Impossible. He craned his neck, examining the ceiling above the starting point. Unblemished plaster, no vents, no conceivable source. He re-verified every window lock, secured from within. The sliding door to the small balcony, bolted and alarmed. The front door, the deadbolt had been firmly engaged upon his return, and only he possessed the primary key. The emergency spare, still securely taped beneath the fire extinguisher housing in the main building corridor, exactly where he'd secreted it months ago. None of it coalesced into sense. Sinking onto the sofa, knife still clutched in his hand, Elias stared at the prints. They were fading now, succumbing to the dry air, leaving only faint, ghostly outlines on the wood. Soon, perhaps within hours, all physical trace of this bizarre intrusion would vanish, leaving only the disarray of his belongings as testament. His phone vibrated in his pocket, the sudden buzz making him jump. A text message from his supervisor. Report finalized for the morning brief? The meeting. Reality, mundane and demanding, began to seep back into the fractured atmosphere of his apartment. Work awaited completion. Dinner needed preparing. Life inexplicably persisted, yet focus remained elusive. Every innocuous sound became magnified, menacing. The cycle of the air conditioner, the distant clatter of the ice maker dispensing cubes. Familiar domestic noises now seemed imbued with threat. He rose and performed another circuit, checking locks, then checking them again. He found himself opening cabinets at random, peering into closets already searched, unsure what he hoped or feared to find. Hours bled away in this state of agitated vigilance. Sustenance was forgotten, appetite extinguished. He paced, checked, rechecked. The footprints evaporated entirely, leaving behind only the faintest discolorations, visible only if one knew precisely where to look. Had he succumbed to delusion? A waking nightmare born of stress? but the dresser drawers remained stubbornly askew. The closet hangers defied his precise ordering. The bleach bottle stood sentinel, facing outward. Small, undeniable markers that someone, something had occupied this space. Around midnight, profound exhaustion began to erode the sharp edges of his anxiety. He hadn't truly rested since returning home. His back protested, feet throbbed. Sleep was a necessity, yet the bedroom felt tainted, unsafe. He dragged his duvet and pillow to the living room sofa, arranging himself to command views of both the front door and the hallway entrance. The phone and the knife were placed within immediate reach on the coffee table. He lay in the enveloping darkness, listening to the symphony of the city, 15 floors below. The murmur of traffic, the mournful cry of distant sirens, the occasional sharp bark of a car horn or a raised voice. Ordinarily soothing sounds of urban life now served only to underscore his isolation. Sleep arrived sporadically, fragile and easily broken. Each minor creak of the building, each sigh of the wind against the glass, jolted him back to hyper-awareness. His eyes would snap open, frantically scanning the shadows for movement. Always, there was nothing. Just the familiar shapes of furniture rendered unfamiliar by darkness and fear. Dawn was painting the eastern sky with tentative strokes of light when a deeper, heavier sleep finally claimed him. Strange, fragmented dreams flickered behind his eyelids. Incessant, dripping water, echoing footsteps, the unnerving sensation of a figure standing over him, observing. He awoke with a violent start, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. Morning sunlight streamed into the apartment, rendering everything aggressively normal. Another day had dawned. He rose, muscles protesting their night spent contorted on the sofa. Coffee was prepared on autopilot, his mind attempting to rationalize the previous day's events as hallucination, a byproduct of overwork and frayed nerves. But as he stood waiting for the machine to finish its cycle, his gaze drifted to the kitchen counter. Something new, something that sent a cascade of ice water through his veins. A wet handprint rested on the cool granite surface, stark, glistening, fresh. Droplets of water still beaded upon it. Stumbling backward from the counter, he fumbled for his phone, dialing the emergency number with trembling fingers. 911, state your emergency. My apartment. Someone is inside. Or they were. I can't be sure. There are wet prints, footprints, now a handprint. But everything's locked. I'm on the 15th floor and... Sir, please slow down. Are you in immediate danger right now? I don't know. I don't think so. But someone was definitely here. They disturbed my belongings. They're leaving these wet marks, but I cannot fathom how they are gaining entry. Your address, sir. We'll dispatch officers to investigate. He provided the details. 10 minutes, they promised. He paced near the front door, a caged animal waiting. The handprint on the counter slowly surrendered its moisture to the air, mirroring the fate of the footprints. 2 uniformed officers arrived, their expressions professionally neutral, perhaps bordering on weary. Elias recounted the events, guiding them through the apartment, pointing out the subtle disturbances. They took notes, nodded with practiced concern, but he perceived the underlying skepticism. No forced entry, no theft, merely a collection of oddly rearranged items, and his increasingly frantic narrative about ephemeral wet prints that had once again conveniently vanished. "Recommend you get those locks changed," one officer advised, his tone suggesting a simple, mundane solution. "Could be someone managed to copy your key." "But the deadbolt," Elias insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "It was engaged when I arrived home, and that doesn't explain prints materializing in the center of the room." They exchanged a brief, knowing glance, the kind reserved for the unstable or the overwrought. "We'll file a report," the second officer stated placidly. "Keep vigilant. Call us immediately if you witness an actual attempt at entry." And then they were gone. He reported sick to work, forfeiting the day to sit sentinel in his living room, watching, waiting. Nothing transpired. Silence reclaimed the apartment. As night fell, the prospect of another vigil on the sofa felt unbearable. He retreated to a hotel several blocks away, the anonymous room a costly but necessary sanctuary. Sleep remained elusive, but the unfamiliar surroundings lacked the specific triggers of his home. The following day demanded his return. Work obligations, meetings, life's relentless machinery couldn't be indefinitely paused. He had the locks changed, a futile gesture against an intruder who seemingly defied physical barriers. Days bled into a week. Nothing further occurred. No inexplicable dampness, no subtly altered possessions. A fragile sense of normalcy began to reassert itself. Elias started sleeping in his own bed again, actively suppressing the memories, trying to reclassify the experience as a bizarre, isolated anomaly. Then, precisely 1 week to the day after the initial discovery, he returned from work. The scent of dampness hit him before he even saw them. Wet footprints, stark against the wood floor once more. A different configuration this time, leading with unnerving directness straight towards his bedroom door. And this time, he knew with chilling certainty, something awaited him there. But that unfolds into another chapter entirely. Fear, he discovered, is transformative. It recalibrates perception, eroding trust in the mundane. Every creak, every shadow, every minute deviation from routine becomes suspect. He once considered himself observant. Now his awareness bordered on the obsessive. The precise angle of a book on a shelf. The specific tonal quality of the building's settling noises at 3 a.m. The exact alignment of hangers in his closet. Details consumed him. Others might have fled, sought refuge in anonymity elsewhere. But Elias remained. Relocation felt pointless. Whatever presence left its spectral signature upon his floors, whatever unseen hand sifted through his private life, whatever watched him in the vulnerable hours of sleep, it could likely find him anywhere. So now, he waits, and he watches. The heavy chef's knife resides permanently on his nightstand, and each morning before his feet even touch the floor, his eyes scan the polished wood, searching for the telltale signs of returning dampness. They will return. They always do. Dawn's first hesitant light bled across the serrated peaks, painting elongated skeletal shadows over what remained of our camp. Only then, as illumination touched the ravaged nylon of our shelter and the scattered detritus of our gear, did the night's true violence announce itself. Yet it wasn't the wreckage that sent ice spiders skittering down my spine. It was the colossal, unclassifiable prints pressed deep into the earth, leading away into the brooding forest. Something had paid us a visit. Something was still out there. And we, fools perhaps, were about to pursue its passage. My name is Elias Thorne. What began as a much-needed weekend escape with Liam, my oldest friend, from the sterile confines of our city lives, had curdled into a waking nightmare. Months we'd planned this immersion, hungry for the untamed solace of the Cascade wilderness. We considered ourselves seasoned woodsmen, Liam and I, yet the deep woods held lessons no manual could impart, terrors no experience could anticipate. Friday afternoon saw us shouldering packs heavy with 3 days' provisions at the trailhead, the ascent taxing but invigorating. By dusk, we'd found our designated haven, a modest clearing beside a chattering brook, weary but elated. God, I needed this, Liam breathed, wrestling with a tent pole. No spreadsheets, no ringing phones, just this. He gestured expansively at the looming trees and the deepening sky. I inhaled the sharp, pine-scented air, a balm to city-worn lungs. It's primordial, I agreed. Let's conjure fire, liberate those beers we hold. The evening unfolded in tranquil communion. We charred sausages over dancing flames, traded familiar stories, and watched the cosmos ignite, star by brilliant star, in the velvet expanse above. A profound isolation settled over us, comforting rather than alarming. As sleep claimed us within our nylon cocoon, the forest murmured its nocturnal symphony. An owl's query, the furtive rustle of unseen lives. It was a lullaby, and I surrendered to a peace I hadn't known in ages. What shattered that peace remains uncertain. Perhaps an abrupt cessation of the forest's whispers, a sudden, unnatural stillness, or maybe some ancient, dormant instinct within me flared, sensing apex danger. Regardless, I snapped awake, heart hammering against ribs, adrift in the tense absolute blackness. Liam, I whispered, my hand finding his shoulder, shaking gently. Liam, wake up. He surfaced with a disgruntled murmur. What time is it? Shh, I commanded, urgency tightening my throat. Listen. Silence descended again, thick and expectant. We strained, every nerve ending alight. Then it came, ponderous footfalls circling our small encampment, slow, measured, the sound of something immense, methodically searching. In the suffocating dark, Liam's hand found mine, his grip bone-crushingly tight. Breath became a luxury neither of us afforded. The pacing ceased, directly outside our flimsy barrier. Deep resonant inhalations followed, the sound of a massive beast sampling the air, assessing. Our thin tent walls felt like tissue paper against the unknown. Abruptly, a low growl resonated, not just in the air, but through the very ground beneath us. It was utterly alien. No bear's rumble, no cougar's snarl. This sound was deeper, guttural, imbued with a chilling, terrifying sentience. Without preamble, the world exploded. Fabric rent with a sound like tearing flesh. Poles snapped, brittle as winter twigs. Liam and I erupted from our sleeping bags, pure adrenaline overriding thought. By the moon's meager light, filtering through the newly violated space where our roof had been, I glimpsed it. Towering, easily exceeding 8 feet, draped in shadow and coarse, dark fur. Not Ursine, not quite. The proportions felt disturbingly wrong, too upright, too structured. And the eyes, oh, the eyes. They shone with a cold, phosphorescent glimmer that spoke not of beast, but of mind. "Run!" The word tore from my raw throat as I seized Liam's arm, propelling him towards the dense embrace of the trees. We blundered through the undergrowth, branches whipping terror a blindfold. Behind us the pursuit began, heavy rhythmic thuds that seemed to shake the very earth. We ran until lungs burned like acid, until legs turned to water, finally collapsing behind the broad trunk of a fallen ancient, sucking air in ragged, desperate gasps. What, in God's name, was that? Liam choked out between breaths. I could only shake my head, my thoughts a maelstrom, refusing to coalesce around the impossible thing we'd witnessed. We huddled there, shivering, for an eternity measured in heartbeats, flinching at every snap of a twig, every sigh of the wind. But the creature, the entity, seemed not to have followed us this far. As the eastern sky reluctantly paled, we crept back towards the clearing, dread coiling in our stomachs. The scene was one of absolute violation. Our shelter lay in ribbons, gear flung haphazardly as if by petulant rage. Deep, vicious gouges scarred the bark of nearby pines. And there, imprinted in the yielding soil, were the tracks, immense, bearing 5 distinct toe impressions, unmistakably hominid in configuration, yet impossibly large. Liam met my gaze, the same unspoken, terrifying conclusion reflected in his wide eyes. Leave. Get out. Flee this cursed range and never return. Logic screamed it. Survival instinct demanded it. But another force, insidious and powerful, that damnable human yearning to know, began to eclipse the fear. "We follow them," Liam stated, his voice quiet but firm. Every rational fiber protested. I wanted the trail back, the car, the mundane safety of asphalt and streetlights. Yet a deeper, more unsettling part of me, a part I didn't want to examine too closely, felt the pull, the mystery. So salvaging what little remained usable, we turned our backs on the path to safety and began tracking the colossal footprints deeper into the wilderness. The trail led us inexorably inward, upward, across steep, unforgiving slopes, and through thickets that tore at our clothes. Whatever made these prints possessed immense strength, crashing through vegetation that forced us into laborious detours. Gradually, the character of the forest shifted. Trees loomed larger, their bark gnarled, their branches contorted into shapes that felt subtly, unnervingly wrong. The undergrowth grew denser, strange, unfamiliar flora interspersed with the native species. "Elias," Liam called, his voice strained. "Look." He pointed towards a massive fir. Etched deep into its bark was an intricate symbol, a complex, swirling geometry that seemed to writhe if stared at too long, inducing a faint nausea. "What is that?" I murmured, hesitant fingers tracing the deep grooves. Liam shook his head, eyes scanning the surrounding woods. "No idea, but it's not alone. Look around." He was right. Now attuned, I saw them everywhere. The same unsettling sigil repeated on the largest, most ancient sentinels of the forest. We pushed onward, the path of the giant prince our only guide, venturing deeper into this altered, uncanny woodland. The air grew thick, strangely heavy, and a profound silence descended. No birdsong, no insect drone. It was as if we had passed through an invisible membrane into another realm entirely. Hours bled into one another. Exhaustion gnawed at us. We hadn't glimpsed our quarry, only its relentless passage. Just as I resolved to argue for retreat, the dense woods opened abruptly into a clearing dominated by a single titan tree, dwarfing all others we had seen. Its colossal trunk was a tapestry of those disturbing symbols, carved so densely they overlapped into an almost unreadable pattern. At its base, nestled amongst thick, gnarled roots, yawned a dark opening, like the maw of some subterranean beast. Liam and I exchanged a look freighted with awe and terror. The footprints led directly into that Stygian void. "We have to go in," Liam whispered, the words barely audible. Primal instinct screamed retreat, flee, never look back. Yet I found myself nodding, drawn by a terrible magnetic curiosity. Flicking on our headlamps, we stepped across the threshold. The air inside was cool, damp, carrying a peculiar musky odor that pricked at the senses. Our beams sliced through the darkness, revealing rough-hewn stone walls, alive with more symbols. These rendered in faded pigments, not carved. The passage snaked downwards, twisting deeper into the earth, our footfalls swallowed by the oppressive silence. Just as the disorientation threatened to become overwhelming, the tunnel widened dramatically, spilling us into a vast cavern. Our lights struggled to penetrate the sheer immensity of the space, but what they illuminated froze the marrow in my bones. The walls bore crude, archaic paintings, immense furred figures depicted alongside diminutive human shapes. Scenes of apparent hunts mingled with what looked disturbingly like rituals. But the centerpiece, standing starkly in the cavern's heart, banished all other thoughts. A rough altar constructed of piled stones, stained ominously dark with something I desperately prayed wasn't blood. Arranged meticulously around its base sat human skulls, their empty sockets staring into eternity. "Liam, we need to go," I managed, the words thick, my hand clamping onto his arm. "Now." His face, stark white in the beam of his lamp, mirrored my horror. He nodded mutely. We turned, scrambling back towards the tunnel entrance, only to find it occupied. Filling the passage, silhouetted against the faint light from behind, stood the creature from our ravaged campsite. Now illuminated by our frantic beams, I saw it fully for the first time. A grotesque synthesis of man and beast, swathed in thick matted pelage, its face an unsettling echo of human features, distorted and primal. And the eyes, those intelligent ancient eyes regarded us not with mere animal hunger, but with something far more complex. It observed us for a long, heart-stopping moment, then emitted a low, rumbling sound from deep within its massive chest. To my utter astonishment, fragmented, guttural words emerged. "You come," it growled, the syllables thick, barely recognizable as speech. Liam and I stared at each other, faces masks of stark terror warring with incredulous wonder. We had sought answers, stumbled upon a nightmare, and now stood face to face with something that defied all known reality. The creature turned, its immense form surprisingly fluid, and gestured deeper into the cavern's unexplored darkness. Despite every synapse shrieking danger, despite the evidence of brutal sacrifice surrounding us, I felt my feet move, a step forward, because in that moment, beneath the weight of impossible discovery, I knew we stood on the precipice of a truth that could shatter the world as we knew it. Following the entity into the labyrinthine depths, the certainty settled upon me. We had irrevocably crossed a boundary. Whatever lay ahead, retreat was no longer an option. We had trespassed into the domain of something ancient, powerful, and utterly unknown. Poised to learn secrets humanity was perhaps never meant to uncover. Our weekend adventure was a distant memory, eclipsed by this terrifying pilgrimage into the heart of primordial mystery. As the profound darkness of the inner earth enveloped us, a chilling question echoed in my mind. Were we explorers on the verge of revelation, or simply prey, lured deeper into the abattoir? The answer, I feared, lay waiting in the shadows, its price potentially more than we could bear to pay. A lone neon sign bled color onto the asphalt, a fragile pulse against the immense, ink-dark canvas of the Moroccan night. We were somewhere on the winding ribbon of road, connecting Fez to Chefchaouen. Beside me, Liam slumped against the passenger window, surrendered to oblivion, utterly oblivious to the fuel gauge needle kissing empty. Our digital lifeline, the GPS, had flatlined hours prior, and my phone, a useless brick, hadn't tasted a signal since we deviated from the main artery. The rental car's tires scrunched over loose gravel as I guided it towards the desolate station. It felt spectral, abandoned, but for the stark island of illumination cast by a single, buzzing fluorescent tube inside the office. My grasp of collegiate French felt flimsy, my Arabic even more so, a paltry collection of courtesies ill-suited for this looming uncertainty. The dashboard glowed 1:47 a.m. as the engine died. Liam remained submerged in sleep, the type that could weather tremors and tempests. His wrist, swaddled in a beige bandage from an earlier tumble on a treacherous mountain pass, throbbed silently. Another reason for our profound lateness. Nothing critical, yet deserving of a physician's glance. A figure detached itself from the station's deeper shadows, wiping grease-stained hands on a crimson rag. He offered a smile that seemed, initially, to cut through the oppressive quiet. My coiled tension eased a fraction. "Bonsoir, mademoiselle," he began, his voice switching smoothly to English, thick with accent. You wander far from the beaten path. I sketched our predicament, the navigational void, Liam's injury, the dwindling petrol. He listened, head tilted in apparent sympathy, already unscrewing the fuel cap. While the pump hummed, he spoke of a clinic in the next town. My cousin, he is there, he offered, his gaze meeting mine. I can guide you. These routes, they deceive after dark. A subtle dissonance in his tone snagged my attention. Generous? Perhaps too generous? Why this intense solicitude for two stray travelers? As he finished fueling, I feigned rousing Liam, murmuring urgently for him to remain watchful. His eyelids fluttered open, instantly deciphering the alarm in my low voice. That's when the sound reached me. The attendant, his back partly turned, spoke into a crackling walkie-talkie. The amicable mask had slipped, his voice dropped, shedding its veneer of welcome, hardening into clipped, urgent Arabic. My limited understanding snagged chilling fragments. Two souls, unguarded, and a phrase that sounded ominously like the serpent's root. A tinny reply squawked back, punctuated by the man's low chuckle. Liam was bolt upright now, utterly awake. He returned to my window, the smile meticulously restored. Follow my vehicle, he instructed. The clinic, merely 15 minutes. And the fuel? A gift. Consider it my welcome to Morocco. Complimentary petrol, a remote outpost, midnight, a clandestine radio exchange, an escort via an unknown serpent's route to a conveniently staffed clinic. Alarm bells clanged violently in my skull. Truly generous, I managed, fumbling for my wallet. But perhaps a hotel first. Liam's wrist can mend with the morning sun. I drew out dirhams, more than sufficient, but he waved them away dismissively. Finding lodging now? Difficult, he pressed, his helpfulness turning insistent. Allow me. The old road saves much time over the highway. Beyond him, peripheral movement snagged my eye. Silhouettes shifting amongst hulking parked trucks obscured by the lot's far gloom. Liam's hand found mine. A single firm squeeze. Our childhood code for immediate retreat. I turned the key, the engine catching, striving to keep my voice level. Thank you, but no. We'll stick to the highway. Safer. His expression dissolved, amiability vanishing like smoke. He muttered sharply into the walkie-talkie. Around us, engines rumbled to life. Trucks I hadn't consciously registered, suddenly present, potent threats in the darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slammed the gearshift into drive. Just then, twin beams sliced through the night, headlights rapidly approaching. A large tourist coach, emblazoned with the logo of a familiar hotel group, was pulling into the station. The attendant's face flickered through another transformation as he instinctively stepped back from our car. The surrounding engines fell silent. I didn't linger. Flooring the accelerator, we merged onto the main highway, scant moments before the bus disgorged its passengers into the station's harsh, fluorescent glare. In the rearview mirror, the lone outpost dwindled, swallowed by the immense Moroccan night. 2 hours later, the brightly lit lobby of a reputable Chef Shawen hotel felt like sanctuary. We recounted the incident to the night manager, who marked the sinister station on a map with a grim nod. We weren't, it seemed, the first to find trouble lurking there. The following day brought illumination. We discovered a network of designated safe stops along popular tourist corridors, vetted locations equipped with surveillance and English-speaking personnel. Authorities, we learned, were actively working to bolster traveler security in rural zones, setting up emergency points and monitoring these isolated businesses. At the clinic, while a doctor examined Liam's now properly assessed sprain, we met Chloe, an American expatriate serving as a patient liaison. She deftly navigated us through the local healthcare protocols and shared insights gleaned from her own years navigating unfamiliar territories. "Listen to your gut," she advised, her gaze steady. "But question your assumptions. Profound kindness often comes from strangers, yet there's a vast gulf between genuine aid and calculated manipulation. Learn the difference." Our remaining journey unfolded with heightened awareness. We carried emergency contacts, plotted safe havens on our maps, kept devices charged. We encountered incredible warmth and unsolicited help from Moroccans, stark reminders that one treacherous encounter couldn't tarnish an entire nation or its people. Back home, the experience catalyzed action. I launched a travel blog focused on safety for women exploring independently. Others contributed their own narratives, near misses, hard-won lessons. Collectively, we built a repository of knowledge for navigating the unknown while remaining vigilant. The incident itself spurred tangible change. Authorities installed emergency call boxes along remote stretches. Local enterprises adopted a safety certification, displaying stickers verifying them as secure stops. Female travelers began sharing real-time locations and forming informal support networks. Just last month, an email arrived from a young woman embarking on her own Moroccan adventure. Rather than recount my fear, I shared the distilled wisdom. Research diligently, know your resources, heed your intuition, and remember that genuine helpfulness is the norm, not the exception. That night taught me not that the world is inherently perilous, but that preparedness is the key unlocking safe exploration. Darkness exists everywhere, but so do those striving to illuminate the way, smoothing the path for travelers yet to come. Now my travels are informed not just by maps and emergency numbers, but by the quiet confidence of experience. The world's wonders await, vast and inviting, best discovered when caution and adventure walk hand in hand. The first time my name slithered from the vacant air, a sibilant sigh in an empty room, I waved it away, a phantom conjured by solitude. Yet the disembodied utterance returned, swelling in volume, sharpening its insistence, until the very plaster and lath of my home seemed poised to confess secrets more dreadful than any nightmare I could sculpt. It began subtly, a phantom breath on a Tuesday evening. That detail clings, sharp and distinct, because I'd just surrendered to the flickering screen, immersed in the grim narratives of a true crime docu-series. Silence draped the house, but for the television's low drone and the venerable timbers groaning under their own weight. 6 months post-divorce, solitude was my familiar. Then during a jarring cut to commercials, I caught it. A whisper, gossamer thin, nearly lost. Eliza, it breathed, my name borne on no discernible current. I silenced the TV, head tilted, straining against the quiet. Nothing. Only the nocturnal settling of the old structure. A shrug, a dismissal. Nerves frayed by televised horrors, surely. But the phenomenon refused to remain a singular anomaly. It recurred the following night, and the one after. Each instance found my name exhaled from a different corner of the domicile. The kitchen, while I occupied the living room. The upper landing's shadows, while I stood before the bathroom mirror. Always solitary, always just beyond the threshold of sight. Initially reason scrambled for purchase. Perhaps the wind, a cunning infiltrator through unseen fissures, mimics speech. Or sound waves from a neighbor's television, warped by their passage through aged walls. These flimsy rationalizations frayed as days bled into weeks. The whispers persisted, shedding their ambiguity, coalescing into unmistakable clarity. And beneath the sound, an unnerving resonance tugged at my memory, a familiarity I couldn't anchor. An aversion to unoccupied spaces took root. I flooded the house with noise, music, television, a constant barrage against the potential silence that bred the whispers. A white noise generator hummed beside my bed, a futile bastion against the nocturnal intrusions that fractured my sleep. Its presence only seemed to embolden the voice. It grew audacious, its repertoire expanding beyond my name. "Help me," it pleaded, a thread of desperation woven through the sound. Other times, a chilling promise. "I'm coming." Tentatively, I broached the subject with friends, cloaking my fear in casual anecdotes about old house quirks. Their laughter, their tales of groaning pipes and settling foundations offered no solace. Their experiences were pale imitations of the sonic haunting I endured. Desperation gnawed. I contacted a local outfit specializing in paranormal phenomena. They arrived bristling with EMF meters and spirit boxes, their methodical sweep of the premises yielding precisely nothing. Old houses make peculiar sounds sometimes, the lead investigator offered, his sympathy a thin veneer over professional skepticism. A silent scream built in my throat. These were not mere sounds. This was a voice, articulate and sharp, calling my name. Weeks warped into months, stretching my sanity taut. Sleep became a shallow, fearful state. Concentration at work evaporated. Every moment within my own walls unfolded under a state of excruciating hypervigilance, ears perpetually strained for the next sibilant call. Then arrived the night that shattered the stalemate. Having succumbed to an exhausted, fitful slumber, I was violently wrenched awake by my name. Not whispered this time, but shrieked. An agonized, terrified cry erupting from the air directly beside my bed. Heart hammering against my ribs, I scrambled from the mattress, fumbling for the light switch. Illumination flooded the room, revealing its expected emptiness. But as I stood there, trembling, my gaze snagged on the dresser mirror. Words, traced in the ephemeral condensation of breath upon the glass. "Remember me." And with a sudden, brutal clarity, I did. The elusive familiarity of the voice, the persistent echo that had plagued me. It was my own. A deluge of recollections broke free, memories dammed up for years. This house, the geography of my childhood, the accidents, the chilling near misses, a near drowning in the bathtub's porcelain depths, a shocking brush with faulty wiring beside this very bed. Each time, salvation had arrived like inexplicable luck. But it hadn't been luck. It had been me. Or rather, iterations of me. Versions less fortunate, lives extinguished within these walls, their spectral essences tethered to the place of their demise. As this devastating understanding washed through me, the whispers surged into a deafening chorus. Dozens of voices, all mine, clamoring simultaneously, pleading, warning, weeping in unending anguish. I collapsed, sinking to the floorboards, overwhelmed by the cacophony of my own spectral selves, echoing from every corner. How could I have forgotten? How could I have permitted myself, adrift after the wreckage of my marriage, to return to this crucible of near fatalities? In that instant, the pull I'd felt towards this house became horribly clear. Some buried fragment of awareness had known, had strained towards remembrance. The other Elizas, the ones who hadn't made it, they had been sounding the alarm all along. With the first fragile light of dawn, resolve hardened within me. Remaining here was untenable, living amidst the constant spectral reminders of my own fragile mortality. Yet simple flight felt like another betrayal. These other selves, these extinguished possibilities, they deserved release. The ensuing weeks saw me immersed in the house's lineage, unearthing its history. I discovered it stood upon the site of an ancient well, long ago filled, effaced from memory. Local folklore whispered of the well as a thin place, a nexus where the partition between worlds wore perilously thin. This knowledge directed my path. I sought out a medium, not a theatrical charlatan, but an elder residing on the town's periphery, spoken of in hushed, reverent tones. She came, her ancient eyes absorbing the house's atmosphere. The moment she crossed the threshold, a sharp intake of breath escaped her. "Oh, child," she murmured, her voice freighted with sorrow. "Such a weight you carry." For hours she navigated the rooms, her lips moving, uttering soft chants in a tongue unknown to me. The whispers responded, swirling into an agitated vortex of sound around us. Yet the old woman stood unwavering, her voice rising, a steady counterpoint to the spectral tempest. As dusk bled across the sky, a palpable shift occurred. The frantic whispers subsided, then ceased entirely, and profound quietude settled, blanketing everything, lifting an invisible pressure I hadn't consciously registered. The medium turned, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "They are quiet now," she stated softly. "Those possibilities, they have found their way onward. But they wished you to know one thing." I held my breath, poised. "They said to live," she relayed. "Live fully for all of them. Live the life denied to them." That night, silence reigned. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I slept deeply, undisturbed by phantom calls or spectral screams. The house felt peaceful. In the morning light, I contacted a realtor. Staying was impossible, the memories too raw, the echoes too profound. But as I began packing, boxing up the fragments of my life, a novel sense of purpose bloomed within me. I hadn't merely been given a second chance. I'd been granted dozens, each one purchased by a version of myself consumed by this house's history. I owed them a life lived with intention, with vibrancy. Locking the door for the final time, a faint sound brushed my ear, almost imagined. Not my name, just 2 words, offered gently. "Thank you." A smile touched my lips as a wave of closure washed over me. The voices were gone, their presence replaced by their parting mandate. Live. Live for all of us. And that is precisely what I intend to do. Window glass didn't just explode inward. It detonated, a crystalline shrapnel spraying across the rough-hewn planks. A second projectile, sharp and lethal, whistled past my ear. Its passage felt more than heard. Our mountain sanctuary, conceived as escape, instantly transmuted into a crucible of survival. Such promise it held, this retreat. Clara, my wife, and our children, Lyra, nearly 13, and young Finn, 8. We dreamt for months of this secluded perch among the peaks, an antidote to urban cacophony, to the relentless pulse of connection. Just us, the whispering pines, the crackle of flames. And those initial days unfolded like a forgotten melody. Forest rambles under emerald canopies, marshmallows caramelized over dancing embers, lamplit evenings lost in cardboard worlds. A halcyon interlude, rare and precious. Then the 4th night descended. A low growl disturbed the twilight calm, an engine where none should be. Anomalous. No other vehicle had marked the track since our arrival. Clara's eyes met mine, a flicker of shared unease. "Lyra, Finn, off to your room now," I managed, striving for nonchalance. "Mom and I need to see who's visiting." Lyra, ever attuned to undercurrents, hesitated. "Dad, is something wrong?" Clara, smoothing invisible worries, guided them away. "Just the caretaker, maybe, checking things." Her voice was a thin veneer over rising anxiety. I slid toward the window, dissolving into the deepening shadows. An ancient pickup, scabbed with rust, bled light onto the dirt clearing. 3 figures emerged, silhouettes against the dying day, each bearing the unmistakable geometry of a firearm. A cold fist clenched around my heart. Not caretakers, not lost hikers. Their movements, sly, economical, scanning the perimeter, radiated pure malevolence. "Clara," a choked whisper. "The children. Now, we hide." Her face, stark white in the gloom, firmed with resolve. A nod. As she vanished toward the bedrooms, I plunged the main room into darkness, extinguishing the lamps. A fragile hope. Perhaps they'd perceive vacancy, move on. Utterly futile. Their voices drifted, low but distinct in the mountain stillness. "Here it is," one muttered. "Gotta be. Miles from anywhere. Good spot to cool off." "Yeah," another voice rasped. "Just hope it's clear." I backed away, mind churning. Who were they? Fleeing what? And how could we possibly navigate this? Clara reappeared, Lyra and Finn towed behind her, their eyes wide pools of fear. A finger pressed to my lips commanded silence. I gestured toward the cabin's rear, toward a narrow utility closet concealed behind paneling. Barely room, but our only sanctuary. The hidden door clicked softly shut, just as the sharp percussion of shattering glass announced their entry. They were inside. Entombed in darkness, my hand found Clara's, our fingers locking. Lyra encircled Finn, who quivered but made no sound. We listened, hyper-alert to the sounds of violation. Boots on wood, doors flung open, the rustle of our possessions being ransacked. "Place ain't empty," a coarse voice declared. "Got clothes, grub. Where the hell are they?" Ice sluiced through my veins. They knew. Discovery felt inevitable. "Tear it apart," a harder voice commanded. "Can't have gone far. And listen, no loose ends. Nobody walks away from this." Clara's breath hitched. I squeezed her hand tighter. The chilling reality settled. These weren't mere squatters. They were killers, desperate to preserve their anonymity. Footfalls approached, heavy, deliberate. A board groaned just beyond our thin partition. Breath held captive in our lungs, muscles coiled. We waited for the inevitable rip of the door. Improbably, the steps receded. They hadn't seen the seams. Time stretched, measured in heartbeats and the intruders' crude noises as they consumed our provisions, swilled our beer, their low conversation sketching a brutal narrative. A bank heist in a valley town, this cabin their temporary haven. Eventually, deeper night draped the mountains and their movements slowed, replaced by the heavy breathing of sleep. Opportunity, thin and perilous. If we could slip past, reach the car. Leaning close, my lips brushed Clara's ear. "A diversion," I breathed. "When it happens, take Lyra and Finn straight to the car. Go. Don't hesitate, not for me." Her head moved, a silent, fierce negation. I cupped her face, forcing her gaze. "Clara, please. There's no other path." Tears shimmered, but she gave a tiny, agonized nod. A swift kiss, then quick embraces for the children. "Fire drill rules," I whispered fiercely. "Low and fast, eyes forward, understand?" Two small heads bobbed, terror stark in their eyes, yet overlaid with trust. Taking a breath that felt stolen, I eased the hidden panel open. The main room lay submerged in lunar silver, etching the forms of two men sprawled asleep on the sofas. The third, presumably, claimed a bedroom. I moved like smoke toward the kitchen galley, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. My fingers closed around the cold, familiar weight of the cast-iron skillet. No retreat now. Summoning every fiber of strength, I launched the heavy pan. It arced through the air and met the front window in a detonation of shattering glass, the sound ripping through the nocturnal peace. Chaos erupted. Shouts, curses. "Now!" The word tore from my throat as I seized a nearby chair, swinging it hard into the first man scrambling upright. A peripheral blur. Clara, Lyra, Finn, streaking for the door. The man I'd struck crumpled. His companion fumbled for his weapon. I dove, a low tackle sending us both sprawling. We wrestled, a frantic tangle of limbs on the floorboards. He possessed brute strength, but desperation lent me a savage energy. A lucky blow connected, rocking his head back, stunning him for a precious second. Then, the flat, deadly crack of a gunshot. My blood froze. Clara? The children? Fury surged, lending new violence to my struggles. Suddenly, arms like steel bands seized me from behind, hauling me backward. The third man. He slammed me against the log wall, the impact expelling the air from my lungs. "Bad move, friend," he rasped, forearm grinding into my windpipe. Darkness encroached at the edge of my vision. Failure tasted like ash. An engine roared to life, tires spitting gravel. The sound was a jolt of pure adrenaline. They were in the car. My captor swore, his grip momentarily loosening as his head swiveled toward the noise. It was the sliver of chance I needed. My knee drove upward, finding its mark. He folded with a guttural gasp. I shoved free, stumbling, then sprinting for the open doorway. Outside, the taillights of our sedan painted frantic red arcs as it skittered down the track, Clara wrestling the wheel. Two figures stood firing into the night, their shots errant in the darkness. I veered sharply, plunging toward the dense embrace of the forest, praying for its concealing shadows. Behind me, enraged shouts, the sharp retort of more gunfire. Something hot zipped past my ear, the displaced air a palpable caress. I ran, faster than I knew possible, branches lashing my face, unseen roots conspiring to trip me. But stopping wasn't an option. Escape first, then somehow find them again. For an eternity, it seemed, I crashed blindly through the undergrowth, weaving an erratic path, seeking only to confound pursuit. Finally, legs trembling, lungs searing with every ragged breath, I collapsed against the rough bark of an ancient pine. Pricking my ears, I listened past my own frantic gasps. Only the familiar nocturnal symphony of the woods answered. I'd thrown them off, at least for now. As the primal surge of adrenaline ebbed, the starkness of my predicament asserted itself. Alone, lost in an unforgiving wilderness, miles from any road, with armed killers potentially still searching. And Clara, Lyra, Finn. A silent prayer formed. Let them be safe. Clara would find help, alert the authorities. Rescue would come. My task was stark. Endure. When the first tentative fingers of dawn probed the canopy, I pushed myself upright and began to walk. Staying put felt like accepting defeat. They were still out there. Every rustle, every snapped twig sent a fresh tremor of fear through me. But the image of my family, the desperate need to know they were unharmed, propelled me onward. It was deep into the afternoon when the thrumming beat of rotors vibrated through the air. Helicopters. Hope surged, instantly tempered by dread. Had help arrived for me or for them? Spotting a small clearing, I stumbled into the sunlight, waving my arms like a madman, shouting until my throat was raw. For one agonizing moment, the aircraft swept past. Then it banked, returning, hovering directly overhead like a guardian dragonfly. As the winch lowered and I was hauled skyward, I glimpsed official vehicles descending upon the distant cabin. Over. We had endured. Later, bathed in the sterile fluorescence of a hospital waiting room, I held Clara, Lyra, and Finn, a fierce, trembling embrace. We were bruised, scraped, shadows haunting our eyes, utterly spent, but whole, alive, together. The Sylvan dream had twisted into shadow, yet we had navigated the nightmare, bound tight in that circle of love, battered but unbroken, came a quiet certainty. Whatever life threw at us now, we would face it together. Thursday surrendered the sky reluctantly, bleeding bruised colors as Elias found his way back to the house. The day, a marathon of tedious exertion, finally lay behind him. He was a newcomer to this pocket of Oregon, this place called Ash Hollow, pitched as an antidote to urban clamor, a haven tucked away from the world's insistent thrum. His purchase, a solitary two-story structure perched at the town's fringe, offered isolation as its primary virtue. No adjacent rooftops, only skeletal trees etching the horizon and a vacant field sprawling behind. Stepping across the threshold that evening, The house greeted him with the same profound stillness he'd left hours before, a quietude bordering on the absolute, yet welcome. Shoes were shed near the entrance, his satchel dropped beside them, a silent surrender. The kitchen beckoned, promising sustenance for a body utterly spent, craving nothing more than the oblivion of sleep. Yet standing before the open refrigerator, its cool breath misting his face as he surveyed the meager contents, an aberrant tremor ran through the quiet. Something felt misaligned, subtly out of true. Elias dismissed it, fatigue playing tricks, conjuring phantoms from exhaustion. He assembled a rudimentary sandwich, procured a drink, and settled at the worn kitchen table. As he ate, the silence deepened, evolving from mere absence of sound into a palpable pressure. It amplified the mundane, the refrigerator's low thrumming drone, the metronomic insistence of the clock dissecting time on the wall, and then a soft percussion from above. Footsteps. He went utterly still, straining his ears, faint, like a memory surfacing, unbidden, yet undeniably a tread, originating from the upper floor. His immediate rationale grasped at the mundane. A forgotten window, a draft coaxing movement from inanimate objects. Rising with deliberate slowness, his pulse beginning a frantic tattoo against his ribs, Elias drifted towards the staircase, every nerve tuned to the silence above. The phantom cadence had ceased, but the unsettling conviction lingered. He was not the sole occupant of this house. A deep inhalation, a muttered self-reproach about yielding to fancy. It was an old structure, prone to groans and sighs, settling into its ancient bones. Still poised at the foot of the stairs, gazing into the ascending gloom, the chill returned, a familiar prickle crawling across the nape of his neck. He ascended, each step measured, the time-worn wood complaining beneath his weight. His gaze remained fixed on the upper hallway, a shadowed passage illuminated by a single weak bulb, half expecting a silhouette to coalesce from the dimness. Nothing. Only the vacant corridor stretched before him. Methodically, he inspected each room, the stark utility of the bathroom, the echoing emptiness of the spare chamber, and finally the sanctuary of his own bedroom. All were undisturbed, precisely as he'd maintained them. Windows secured, doors latched. A ragged sigh escaped him, tinged with self-consciousness. The profound quiet, the unfamiliarity, was breeding specters in his mind. Descending once more, he flicked on the television, seeking solace in its artificial chatter, attempting to banish the residual disquiet. Paranoia, he insisted inwardly. Just the strain of settling into solitude. Later, surrendering to weariness, Elias sought his bed, though the tendrils of unease followed, clinging persistently. He lay supine, tracing the patterns of shadow on the ceiling, cataloging every creak, every settling groan of the house timbers, until exhaustion finally claimed him. Consciousness returned abruptly in the dense heart of the night. For a moment, disorientation reigned. The room was a black void, the silence absolute. He courted sleep's return, but then it came again, that soft, scuffling tread. Closer now, just beyond his bedroom door. His heart hammered, a frantic drum against the stillness. Sitting bolt upright, he held his breath, listening intently. The footsteps were unhurried, measured, evoking the image of someone pacing back and forth, just outside his refuge. Fumbling on the nightstand, his fingers trembling, Elias located his phone, activating its flashlight. The sudden beam carved a stark cone through the oppressive dark. He slipped from bed, moving with ghost-like quietness, and approached the door, holding the light aimed low, a trembling beacon against the floorboards. He eased the door open, centimeter by careful centimeter. The hallway stretched before him, empty, sterile in the flashlight's glare. He swept the beam around, corners, doorways, shadows, finding nothing, no trace, no evidence of intrusion. Hesitantly, he stepped out, his eyes probing the deeper darkness beyond the light's reach, every sense screamingly alert. Another swift check of the adjacent rooms confirmed their vacancy. The house stood still, breathing its silent secrets around him. Retreating to his bed, his thoughts churned, a frantic attempt to rationalize, to confine the experience within the bounds of imagination. But sleep remained elusive. For protracted hours he lay rigid, listening, waiting, each trivial sound amplified into a potential threat, jarring his already frayed nerves. The following day was an exercise in forced normalcy. At work, Elias chided himself for his nocturnal anxieties, attributing them to overwrought nerves, the stress of relocation. Yet upon returning home as dusk painted the landscape in somber hues, the familiar apprehension settled over him once more, heavy as the humid air, that persistent, unnerving sensation of being observed. He moved through his evening rituals, a pantomime of routine, striving to ignore the feeling. But each time he neared a window, the skin on his back prickled, convinced unseen eyes were fixed upon him from the deepening twilight outside. He'd glance out, compelled, only to find the familiar tableau, the deserted yard, the dark, brooding line of trees bordering the field. Later, preparing for bed, a flicker of movement at the edge of his vision snagged his attention, a shadow detaching itself from the greater darkness outside the window. He turned, his heart seizing, and saw him, a man positioned just beyond the weak circle cast by the porch light. Tall, indistinct in the gloom, but for the stark paleness of his face and the dark mass of his hair. His expression was utterly vacant, his gaze locked onto the window, directly at Elias. A cold paralysis gripped him, his thoughts scattering like startled birds. Call the authorities? The impulse warred with an inexplicable reluctance to break eye contact, to sever this silent, terrifying connection. He watched, breathless, anticipating some gesture, some sound. But the figure remained immobile, a statue carved from night and silence, simply staring. Elias took an involuntary step backward, his hand groping blindly for the reassuring weight of his phone. When his gaze flickered back to the window, the man was gone. The yard lay empty, reclaimed by swaying shadows and the sighing wind. He dialed the police, his voice unsteady as he recounted the encounter. Officers arrived, their flashlights cutting methodical paths across the property. Their search yielded nothing. No disturbed earth, no footprints, no tangible sign that anyone had trespassed. They offered placating words, likely a local youth indulging in a tasteless prank, perhaps someone mistaking the house. But Elias knew. The certainty settled deep in his bones, cold and hard. He had seen the man. He had been watched. The subsequent days unfolded under a pall of tension. Each evening, returning from work, Elias half expected to find the silent sentinel waiting, but the yard remained stubbornly empty. Yet the feeling persisted, an invisible pressure, the conviction that the watcher lingered just out of sight, concealed amongst the trees, patient. One evening, seeking distraction in the flickering light of the television in the living room, he heard it anew. The footsteps, louder this time, more defined, imbued with a chilling insistence. They resonated through the floorboards, echoing from the upper level. Clutching his flashlight like a talisman, heart hammering against his ribs, Elias began the slow, cautious ascent, each creak of the stairs amplifying the dread. Reaching the landing, he swept the flashlight beam down the hallway. Emptiness greeted him, the vacant doorways like dark, waiting mouths. And then, a different sound reached him, a faint, rhythmic tapping. It emanated from his bedroom window. He turned, a shiver tracing a glacial path down his spine, and moved slowly toward the source. The tapping persisted, soft yet deliberate, like a polite, insistent summons. Standing before his bedroom door, he drew a ragged breath, reached for the curtain, and pulled it sharply aside. He was there, directly outside the window, his face mere inches from the glass. His eyes, wide and unblinking, devoid of any discernible emotion, stared straight through the pane, locking onto Elias's own. Elias stumbled backward, a strangled gasp tearing from his throat, his mind reeling, unable to process the impossible proximity, the sheer, silent intensity of the gaze. The man didn't move, offered no reaction, simply continued his unnerving scrutiny, his face a pale, expressionless mask against the night. Panic erupted. Elias bolted from the room, clattering down the stairs, fumbling with the front door lock. He didn't pause until he was safely inside his car, the keys trembling violently in his grasp. The engine roared to life, and he drove, directionless, propelled solely by the primal need for distance. He found refuge in a sterile motel room miles away, spending the night staring at the water-stained ceiling, every anonymous noise causing him to flinch. Days passed before he could summon the courage to return. When he finally did, the house stood silent and empty, exactly as he had fled it. But the oppressive atmosphere remained, thick and suffocating, the persistent awareness of being watched, of something unseen lurking just beyond the fragile barrier of glass and wood. Who the man was, or what desolate purpose drove him, Elias couldn't fathom. But every night now he draws the curtains tight, verifies the locks with obsessive care, and waits in the charged silence, burdened by the chilling certainty that eventually the face at the window will return. Barely 7 days had passed since I'd transplanted my life to this small house, nestled on a street, hushed as a held breath. My faithful, wheezing sedan cooled in the abbreviated driveway after depositing me and my cargo of cardboard boxes. Surveying my new domain, the modest lawn, the neighboring yards mirroring its quietude, I found only unremarkable order. Houses stood in neat, simple rows, well-kept clones of one another. Nothing snagged the eye, save perhaps the house flanking mine to the left. Its shutters were drawn tight, like eyelids shut against the sun, and the grass beneath them had grown shaggy and unkempt. A minor lapse in suburban perfection, I surmised. Some folks just aren't gardeners. It was no concern of mine. That inaugural night, sleep proved elusive. The day's exertions leaving my nerves frayed and humming. Around the witching hour, a sound filtered through the adjoining wall, thin and strange. Not the scuffling of nocturnal creatures I quickly discerned, but something achingly human, weeping. It was muffled, a thread of sorrow spun with pauses, as if the mourner struggled for control. I rose, padding silently to the window that overlooked the shuttered house. Darkness reigned next door. No lamps glowed, no vehicles graced the drive. Nothing stirred in the visible spectrum. Cracking the window open a sliver, I strained my ears. The lament continued, a soft, persistent rhythm of grief, for perhaps 10 minutes before abruptly ceasing. Morning light brought a tentative plan. I crossed the asphalt river dividing our lawns to rap on the door opposite mine. A man appeared, perhaps 50 years etched onto his face, clad in the uniform of domesticity. Gray t-shirt, denim trousers. His hair was clipped short, his expression impassive. "Morning," I began. "Just moved in next door. Name's Elias. I was curious about the house beside mine." I gestured towards the withdrawn facade. His gaze flickered towards it, then returned to me. Flat. "That one? Deserted," he stated, matter of fact. "Years now." A frown creased my brow. "But last night," I countered, "I heard someone crying, distinctly. Sounded like it came from inside." He offered a non-committal shrug. "Place has been vacant since the owner vanished. Must have been something else carrying on the wind. Raccoon, maybe." His disinterest was a palpable thing. With a curt nod, he retreated, the door closing with soft finality. Later, down the block, I struck up a conversation with a younger woman, ponytail swinging as she wrestled a garden hose amidst flourishing planters. Decked out in shorts and running shoes, she listened, head tilted, as I introduced myself and recounted the nocturnal sorrow. Confusion clouded her features. She echoed the previous sentiment. The house stood empty, had for ages, 8 years, she estimated. Why it remained unoccupied was a local mystery. Crucially, she'd never heard a thing. The remainder of the afternoon dissolved into the necessary chaos of unpacking. My living space slowly took shape. The television found its perch on a low stand. The sofa wrestled into position. The kitchen stocked with rudimentary provisions. By dusk, a semblance of order had emerged, yet the neighbors' dismissals hadn't settled my mind. My ears hadn't deceived me. That had been the sound of human despair. I resolved to keep vigil. As midnight approached once more, I extinguished my lights, positioning myself near the window facing the silent house. Around 12:30, the sound returned. It began as a low murmur, swelling slightly, faint, yet undeniably originating from within those walls. Too rhythmic, too laden with breath for any animal. Pressing my ear to the plaster, I could almost sense the vibrations. I silenced the air conditioner, straining to capture every nuance. The weeping persisted, a 10-minute measure of misery, before fading into silence again. A knot tightened in my gut. This felt profoundly wrong. The impulse to call someone, authorities, anyone, warred with the lack of tangible proof. Reporting weeping from a supposedly empty house at midnight. It sounded like the prelude to ridicule. Still the not knowing gnawed at me. Tomorrow, I decided, I would investigate closer. The following day dawned warm. Around noon, I ambled over to the forsaken property. Tall grasses and opportunistic weeds choked the lawn. Dust lay thick on the porch steps. The front door, its paint cracked and peeling, presided over a desiccated welcome mat. Cupping my hands, I tried peering through the front window, but the tightly sealed shutters blocked all view. I circled the perimeter. Other windows offered the same impenetrable facade. Everything felt hermetically sealed. The front doorknob refused to turn, locked fast. An attempt to peek through the mail slot proved futile, obstructed from within. Silence clung to the place like ivy. No hint of occupancy, no whisper of movement. I knocked once, a tentative tap. Nothing. Feeling conspicuous and foolish, I retreated to my own sanctuary. Around 3, another attempt at gathering local lore seemed warranted. The couple residing to my right, an older pair weathered like matching garden gnomes, were occupied cleaning their car in the driveway. I approached, offered my name, and posed the now familiar question about the house next door. The man straightened, wiping his hands on a rag, and recited the same narrative, empty since before their arrival 5 years prior. Belonged to some fellow who left abruptly and never returned. Locked up tight, ignored by all. Had they ever noticed anything unusual? Any strange sounds? He exchanged a glance with his wife before shaking his head firmly. "Quiet as the grave," he pronounced. "Never heard a peep." His wife nodded placidly in agreement, both regarding me with mild, untroubled curiosity. Back inside my own 4 walls, I sought refuge in distraction. The television flickered, offering meaningless narratives, but my thoughts kept circling back to the enigma next door. The unsettling feeling persisted. That night I prepared. Perched by the window again, notepad and phone at the ready, I waited. Promptly, around 20 minutes past midnight, the sound began. That soft, unmistakable weeping. I activated the recording function on my phone. Rising, I scanned the exterior through the window. Stillness. Slipping out my back door onto the small deck, I let my eyes adjust to the moon-dappled darkness. The sound was clearer out here, undeniably emanating from the adjacent structure. "Hello?" I whispered into the night, the sound barely carrying. The weeping faltered, paused. I held my breath. Then it resumed, indifferent to my presence. I retreated indoors, securing the lock, and listened to the recording. Faint, distorted, yet undeniably there. The cadence of sobbing. Tomorrow, I resolved, I would contact the non-emergency police line. Let them make a formal assessment. It felt excessive, yet necessary. The next morning's call to the local constabulary was met with professional courtesy. I laid out the facts, the nightly crying, the consistent timing, the supposedly vacant house. An officer would be dispatched later to perform a welfare check, the voice on the line assured me. Relief mingled with apprehension. Around 6 that evening, a patrol car rolled to a stop. A uniformed officer emerged, listened patiently as I reiterated my account, jotting notes. He then approached the silent house, tested the doors, peered through windows, knocked firmly. No response. He aimed his flashlight beam through a minuscule gap in one shutter before returning to me. "Looks deserted, sir," he reported calmly. "Secured tight. Can't see anyone inside. Could be vermin in the crawl space, maybe an echo from somewhere else. If it persists, call us again. His politeness felt like a dismissal. I wasn't reassured. Animals don't weep with such heartbroken regularity. Why always the same hour? Why the consistent duration? A new plan began to form. Tonight, I would close the distance. I'd use the cover of my own backyard, approach the fence line dividing the properties. Perhaps proximity would reveal a flicker of light, a shadow of movement. As midnight descended, I doused my lights, donned dark clothing, and slipped outside. Crossing the dew-kissed grass, I positioned myself beside the chain-link barrier, separating my yard from the neglected one next door. The grass there stood taller, obscuring the foundation, though I could make out the silhouette of a small shed in the far corner. No illumination emanated from the house itself. Then, precisely on schedule, the weeping commenced. Closer now, clearer, unquestionably inside the house. My pulse quickened, a dampness forming on my brow. I remained utterly still, absorbing the sound. It seemed female, the sobs ragged, punctuated by shuddering breaths. No words, just pure, unadulterated sorrow. My throat constricted. The urge to call out again battled with a primal fear. I stood rooted, a passive witness. After its customary 10 minutes, the sound ceased, as if a switch had been thrown. Back inside, lock secured. I splashed cold water on my face, my hands betraying a slight tremor. The thought of breaking in surfaced, unwelcome but persistent. It wasn't in my nature, but the mystery was becoming unbearable. What if someone was trapped, injured? What if it was something more sinister? I wasn't interested in theft, only in answers. The following day involved reconnaissance. Circling the block, I scouted for alternative access points to the neighboring backyard. A side gate existed, but it was secured with a hefty padlock. The rear fence, like the one adjoining my property, was climbable chain link, though exposed. Yet the pervasive indifference surrounding the house suggested the risk of being observed was low. Midnight arrived again. This time preparation was key. Gloves, a dark jacket, a compact flashlight, phone secured in a pocket. I slipped out the back, scaled the fence into the overgrown yard, and dropped into a crouch. The house loomed dark and inert. I waited for the signal. Punctually, the weeping began. It seemed to originate from the ground floor, perhaps the front room. I crept towards a side window, testing a shutter. It held firm. Another yielded the same result. Circling to the rear, I found an old wooden door, secured by a deadbolt. My gaze fell upon a loose plank in the siding near the back steps. Prying it gently revealed a dark crawl space entrance, exhaling an odor of damp earth. My flashlight beam cut through the blackness, illuminating only dirt and decaying insulation. No ingress there. The crying continued, quieter now, but unwavering. My search led me to the opposite side of the house, where a basement window presented an opportunity. A crack spiderwebbed across one corner. Tapping it produced a loose rattle. Shielding my hand with a glove, I pressed a small stone against the fractured glass, working carefully to minimize noise. After a tense minute, a shard broke free. I managed to push the window inward. The flashlight revealed a stark concrete floor, cobweb-draped shelves, an empty subterranean space. Squeezing through the opening, scraping slightly against the frame, I dropped onto the cool floor. The air hung thick with dust and mildew. I stood motionless, listening. The weeping was directly above me. Locating a set of wooden stairs, I ascended, each tread groaning under my weight, the flashlight beam dancing ahead. At the landing, a door stood slightly ajar. Turning the knob confirmed it was unlocked. Easing it open, I entered what appeared to be a kitchen. Vintage refrigerator, cabinets shedding paint, a dust-shrouded table. A chill permeated the air, raising goosebumps. The source of the sorrow was now unmistakably close, emanating from a room to my left. Heart hammering against my ribs, I moved towards the sound, flashlight beam preceding me. The living room materialized, archaic furniture draped in ghostly white sheets, sofa, armchairs, coffee table. Then movement in the corner. A figure huddled on the floor, back pressed against the wall. Female, clad in jeans and a stained shirt, tangled hair obscuring her face. She rocked almost imperceptibly, crying softly into her drawn-up knees. I froze, the flashlight beam catching her face as she looked up. Her eyes, red-rimmed and glistening, widened in terror. I raised my empty hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said, my voice hushed. She remained silent, shrinking back, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I tried again. "I heard you crying, every night. I live next door. Are you all right?" Still no response, just that wide-eyed fear. She pressed herself harder against the plaster. Taking a cautious step forward, I showed my open palm again. She flinched violently. I stopped. "I just want to help," I offered. She swallowed hard, her voice emerging low and raspy. "Leave me alone." My mind raced, alive, not spectral. But why here? Squatting seemed plausible, explaining her hidden existence. But the ritualistic crying. "Are you living here?" I asked gently. "Everyone says this place is empty." She swiped at her nose with the back of her hand, looking gaunt, exhausted. Evading the question, she repeated, her voice cracking. "Go. Get out." Confusion warred with concern. Pushing her seemed wrong. "Okay," I conceded, stepping back. "I'll go. But maybe I can call someone? Help you find shelter?" She shook her head vehemently. "No, just go." A small cough escaped her. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Her fear was palpable. I retreated through the kitchen, located the basement door, and exited the way I'd come. The night air outside felt startlingly fresh. Scaling the fence, I returned to my own house, locked the door, and sank onto a kitchen chair, hands trembling. Relief that it wasn't something supernatural mingled with a profound unease. She was real, and trapped in some private hell I couldn't comprehend. The weeping didn't cease immediately. On subsequent nights, the familiar sound returned at its appointed hour, but now imbued with the knowledge of its source. I made no further attempts to enter the house, nor did I contact the police again. A strange sort of pity took root. One afternoon I left a small offering near the fence line in my backyard. A bottle of water and some sealed snacks in a plastic bag. By the next morning, it had vanished. Though I never witnessed her retrieve it, I felt certain she had. I didn't try to communicate further. The crying continued, its duration variable now. Sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes longer. The mystery remained. but the immediate threat felt diffused. Then subtly, things shifted. The nightly lament grew softer, its occurrences less predictable. One night, silence reigned. The following morning, inspecting the fence line, I noticed faint footprints in the soft earth leading away from the rear of the empty house towards the street. I never heard the crying again, nor saw any sign of her. The house resumed its vacant stillness. Life on the quiet street continued, my neighbors oblivious or indifferent. I kept my discovery to myself. The house next door remains shuttered and silent, ostensibly empty. Sleep comes easier now, though occasionally a trick of memory or the wind conjures a phantom echo of sobbing in the dead of night. I keep my doors locked, avert my gaze from the house's blank windows, and hold on to the unsettling knowledge of what I found, grateful it wasn't something worse. His eyes, shards of flint catching the dim overhead light, snagged mine in the rear-view mirror. That glance fractured the moment, shattering the illusion of benevolent rescue I'd foolishly embraced. What had seemed a lifeline, tossed onto the desolate shoulder of the highway, now felt like a tightening noose. Deeper we plunged into the umber twilight, folding over the landscape, the truck swallowing miles of unfamiliar asphalt, and a single frantic pulse hammered in my mind. How do you exit a speeding cage in the heart of nowhere? The day had unspooled like a long frayed ribbon of concrete. A pilgrimage to my sister Maeve's, one state carving into the next, a journey etched into muscle memory. Yet the familiar panorama of undulating fields and sentinel pines had dissolved into a hypnotic blur under the weight of the miles. My focus narrowed to reaching her sanctuary before darkness claimed the road entirely. Then the world ruptured, a percussive crack, like a gunshot, followed instantly by the sickening gravitational yaw of the car, wrestling against my grip, pulling hard towards the ditch. A shredded tire, exquisite timing. I wrestled the vehicle onto the gravel verge, stones chattering against the undercarriage like angry teeth, before silence fell. A sigh escaped, misting the cooling air as I climbed out. The rear passenger tire gaped, utterly violated. Resignation settled heavy as I opened the trunk, already weary of the grimy work ahead. Only then did the second blow land. The spare, nestled in its well, was as limp and useless as the ruined one. A surge of pure, incandescent frustration flared. An hour, minimum, still separated me from Maeve's doorstep. And here I sat, marooned, automotive amputee. My phone, clutched like a talisman, offered only the stark, digital epitaph. No service. Just as despair began to crystallize, the growl of an engine slowed. Headlights swept past, then reversed. A pickup truck, seasoned and sturdy, crunched to a halt ahead of my crippled sedan. A man unfolded himself from the driver's seat. 40s, perhaps, capped in faded twill, flannel shirt softened by wear. Trouble? His voice carried easily on the still air as he ambled closer. Relief, potent and premature, washed through me. Flat, I managed nodding, and the spares decided to join it. He clicked his tongue, a sound of practiced sympathy. Rotten luck. Mind if I take a look? I waved a hand towards the casualty. Be my guest, but I think it's terminal. He crouched, examined the rubber carcass, then straightened. Yep. She ain't rolling anywhere. Listen, there's a garage about 20 miles on. Happy to give you a lift. Get someone lined up to fetch your car." Hesitation prickled along my nerves. Every cautionary tale screamed against accepting rides from strangers. Yet the alternative was a night spent roadside, vulnerable, with the temperature dropping and the shadows lengthening. What real choice existed? That would be incredibly helpful. "Thank you," I replied, injecting a confidence I didn't possess. A smile touched his lips but failed to ignite his eyes. "Glad to help out. Grab your essentials." My phone, wallet, a small overnight bag. I retrieved them quickly, a silent plea winging its way upward as I climbed into the passenger seat, praying this leap of faith wouldn't land me in an abyss. The initial miles passed in the mundane rhythm of engine hum and small talk. He introduced himself as Silas, inquired vaguely about my destination. I offered clipped, cautious answers, guarding personal details like state secrets. But an insidious wrongness began to creep in. The road, winding now through increasingly dense woods, felt alien. Surely the route to civilization wouldn't burrow deeper into this wilderness. "Are you certain this leads to the service station?" I ventured, striving for casual curiosity. Silas's knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel. "Oh, sure. Just up ahead. Roads have probably changed a bit since your last trip." I nodded, a hollow gesture, while my heart began a frantic tattoo against my ribs. A furtive glance at my phone confirmed the digital void. Still no service. It was then, catching his reflection in the side mirror this time, that the mask disintegrated. The easygoing facade vanished, replaced by an unnerving, predatory stillness. Ice water sluiced down my spine. The full terrifying weight of my situation crashed down. Thought needed to be swift, precise. Ejecting myself from the speeding truck was suicide. The velocity alone was lethal, and survival would mean being utterly lost in this green, indifferent maze. I needed leverage, a reason to halt this forward momentum, a way to shatter the isolation. "You know," I began, forcing a lightness that felt grotesque. "I'm almost positive I left my medication back in the car. It's really important. Could we possibly just swing back quickly?" His jaw tightened, a muscle twitching near his temple. "Can't do that. Nearly there now." "Please," I pressed, desperation threading my voice. "It won't take long. I really need—" "I said no," he snarled, the veneer of helpfulness utterly stripped away. "You're not going anywhere." Raw fear threatened to paralyze me, but I shoved it back. Panic was a luxury I couldn't afford. Calm. Observe. Wait for an opening. Rounding a sharp bend, a flicker of hope flared, improbable and bright. A gas station, tucked into a clearing. Small, weathered, perhaps, but undeniably there. Lights casting a warm pool onto the tarmac. A lone car parked by the pumps. "Oh, look," I exclaimed, pointing, my voice trembling slightly. "Maybe they have a mechanic or a phone. Let's stop there." Silas's grip on the wheel looked bone-crushingly tight. That place, shut down, years ago. But the evidence blazed before us. The lit windows, the vehicle. He was lying, and the lie hung stark and ugly between us. In that instant, instinct detonated into action. It was a wild gamble, a lunge into chaos, but it was mine. As the truck drew parallel with the station's entrance, I seized the steering wheel, wrenching it violently to the right. The vehicle bucked, tires screaming in protest. Silas roared, grappling for control as we fishtailed wildly across the opposing lane. For one heart-stopping second, the world tilted, threatening to invert. Then spinning, we hurtled into the gas station lot, the journey ending abruptly with a sickening thud against a low concrete barrier. The impact stole my breath, but adrenaline surged, a fierce electric current. My fingers, clumsy with tremors, fumbled at the seatbelt buckle. Silas slumped against the wheel, momentarily stunned but already stirring. Click. The belt released. I shoved the door open, tumbling out onto the asphalt, legs like waterlogged reeds. Shouts erupted nearby. Figures emerged from the station's illuminated doorway. "Help!" I screamed, staggering towards the light, towards salvation. "Please help me!" Behind me, a door slammed. Silas recovered, pursuing. But before he could close the distance, two men materialized, placing themselves firmly between us. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" one demanded, his voice rough but blessedly real. The story poured out of me, a torrent of fractured words. The flat tire, the feigned charity, the creeping dread, the terrifying certainty. Silas began to sputter denials, weaving a frantic narrative of confusion, perhaps intoxication. But the men's faces remained hard, unconvinced. One gently steered me towards the station's interior, while the other stood sentinel, watching Silas. Inside, the attendant was already on the phone, his voice reporting an incident, fading into a dull roar as the adrenaline tide receded, leaving me stranded on the shores of shock. I collapsed onto a plastic chair, tremors racking my body. It was finished. I was alive. Yet the chilling phantom of what might have been was only just beginning to solidify in my mind. Police cruisers arrived swiftly, their flashing lights painting the scene in stark strobes of red and blue. They separated us immediately, gathering fragmented accounts. Through the window, I watched them cuff Silas, whose true name I'd later learn was Victor Martel, and place him securely in the back of a patrol car. An officer approached me then, his expression somber. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come to the station. We have some questions." I could only nod, numb and utterly spent, swept along by the current of events. At the station, under the sterile fluorescent lights, the true dimensions of my near-fatal encounter sharpened into horrifying focus. Victor Martel wasn't just a random predator. He was the prime suspect in a string of disappearances haunting this very stretch of highway. Authorities had hunted him for months, but he'd remained elusive, a ghost in the system. Until tonight, until me. As I recounted the details, each memory dredged up, contributing to the official record. A cold sickness bloomed deep inside. How many others had been lured by that same innocuous offer? How many hadn't possessed the desperate luck, the split-second impulse that had saved me? The officers commended my quick thinking, lauded the bravery of forcing the crash. Brave wasn't the word I felt. Foolish, perhaps, for overriding the primal whisper of caution, for placing politeness above preservation. Hours later, Maeve burst through the station doors, her face pale, eyes brimming with tears as she crushed me in a hug. "Oh God, I was frantic," she choked out. "When you never arrived, when your phone just kept ringing." Holding on to her, the dam finally broke. The terror The stress, the sheer, overwhelming relief poured out in ragged, heaving sobs. The ensuing weeks were a disorienting vortex of interviews, victim support counselors, and the sudden glare of media attention as the story ignited public interest. Martel's capture cracked open 3 cold cases, offering agonizing closure to families suspended in years of uncertainty. For me, the aftermath was a landscape riddled with invisible mines. Nightmares stalked my sleep. Sudden noises made me flinch. The simple act of getting into a car became a trial by fire, each journey shadowed by anxiety. Yet slowly, painstakingly, aided by therapy and time's patient erosion, healing began. I learned to heed the quiet hum of intuition, to prioritize my safety without apology. My ordeal, once a source of paralyzing fear, became fuel. I started speaking out, advocating for highway safety initiatives, for awareness of the missing. Now, years removed, when I travel that same highway, the fear no longer dominates the view. Instead, the familiar curves and stretches of pine remind me of an unexpected resilience, of the desperate clarity that steered me from the abyss and inadvertently delivered a monster to justice. The memory of that day remains, a chilling echo of how swiftly normalcy can curdle into nightmare. But it doesn't dictate my path. It serves instead as a stark, indelible reminder. Always be vigilant. Always trust that inner compass, and never underestimate the dangers that can lurk behind the most ordinary smiles, bathed in the plain light of day.